Greetings from the Garden of Eden. Today is another episode of Bounties of the Land, and I wanted to touch back in on this moringa tree here because this moringa tree is super powerful. It's super potent. It's one of the most newly popular sort of superfood fads, trends, and rightfully so, because it is super nutritious, packed with mass amounts of nutrients, which I'll put in the post as far as details go. But what's really interesting is that this is not native to where we are. It grows in Africa natively, and it can't live throughout the year any place that gets freezes. So we get freezes, but we've been growing this moringa for now like 3 or 4 years. And what's really cool is that we're about to come into the fall winter right now, and we're gonna get our first freeze here. Right now it's pretty nice and sunny, but we're gonna get our first freeze here within a week or two, and this whole tree is gonna die. So like, this tree is real big. It's probably close to about 20 feet tall, right? But what's really impressive is that this tree grew literally from the ground all the way to 20 feet in just this summer, right? So it started growing like late spring, and you can see how thick this is. Man, I can't even get my whole hand around it, and my hands, are pretty long. So this grew this big, right? Just in this summer. So late spring it started growing. Now it's 20 feet tall. It's that thick. And so what happens is once we get to right around this time, what we do is we harvest off all these branches. Now the leaves are the most popular edible part. You can eat them raw, you can saute them. They're a little bitter, but they're super nutritious. So we harvest out all these, we dehydrate, we dry out all the leaves, and we make like a superfood powder, of which throughout the whole winter we can put in our smoothies, things like that. So it's a really easy way to get a lot of nutrients. It's also an easy way to store it for the winter time. But what's really also super cool about this moringa is that the whole branch, the whole stalk, the whole root, everything is edible, right? So this is actually a huge amount, right? It's a huge amount of food. It's not just the leaves that are edible, but this whole stalk is edible. So, realistically, you can't just really gnaw on the stalk itself. I mean, you could, but it's really hard. So, grating it is one way. And or two, what we do is we just make a tea out of it. So we just cut the stalk up into chunks, and then, you just steep the wood chunks themselves in the hot water, and you make a tea, and the water absorbs the nutrients from the stalk. So it's actually a ton of food. It's a huge amount of food. And so even though it doesn't grow native here, and normally I only like to grow native stuff ideally, but even though it's not only is it not native, but it dies every single year. So after we harvest this, what we do is we cut it off down at the ground, and then you can sort of see already how there's kind of a mound over here. But basically what happens is that we cover the whole like root system there. We cover the stump basically with a couple feet of wood chips, and the wood chips keep the roots warm enough throughout the winter time to where even though the upper part that's exposed to the elements dies, the roots stay alive. Next spring, right, the root system is even bigger than it was this year, and it's going to grow even bigger and even faster come next spring. So even though it's not a native, even though it's not a, it's kind of a perennial, but even though it dies off, right, in the winter time, it comes back bigger every single year, and it's actually a ton of food. It's really easy to grow. It requires very little water. Can grow in all sorts of types of soil, and it's super nutritious. I mean, there's people that are paying 10-20 bucks a pound, right, for this kind of stuff, and I'm just growing 20-foot trees of it over here. So this is a really fun and exciting piece. It's about to be freezing here pretty soon, so I wanted to cover that before it happens. And I've actually got a bunch of other stuff that I'm hoping to cover in these bounties of the land before it gets frozen. I'm super busy. Just been sleeping 2 to 5 hours a night for over a week now. I've got SteemFest coming up here really soon. Heading out to LA tonight actually. And you know, I'm gonna try to crank out a couple of these bounties of the land. Steam on to SteemFest, baby.